Hi, and welcome back to Reverse Shot, the show where we take a look at the foibles of the media and alert you to the problems in it. Well, we've been all week long at the Democratic National Convention, and if you haven't noticed, critical thinking is in short supply in the corporate media. Why? Well, most of the people of consequence in corporate media have fled. So this week we decided what we would do is talk a little bit about that fleeing from the industry. And with this, we've got a great conversation lined up with Oliver Darcy. Take a look. Hi, and welcome back to Reverse Shot. This is a show where we take a look at the foibles and the problems of the press today. There are plenty. And today we've got with us former CNN media reporter, now struck out on his own with a newsletter called Status, Oliver Darcy. Oliver, thanks for joining us today. And look, I'm going to just cut to the chase. You've got a great piece, and if anyone hasn't read it, I recommend that you simply subscribe to Status and take a look at what he's written this week about the press and how we covered the recent Donald Trump news, I guess you would call it a news conference, press conference, I don't know what you call it. I didn't think it was a press conference. They didn't want me there. They denied me credentials. So, Oliver, I guess, what did we do wrong? I'll go back to your column. What did we do wrong?
I just think that the press, Donald Trump loves attention, right? And so he does these events and he pulls these stunts and says the most inflammatory, incendiary things to just garner attention because that man just needs it and he feeds off of it. And that's how he was elected in 2016, by just getting attention, saying things at rallies that the news media focused on. And so, this week he announced he's going to hold a so-called press conference. And instead of judging the event, I would, of course, send a reporter to it. But the press really made it an event. They hyped it up with him. And then you saw, CNN and Fox News just air this thing. And, for about a half an hour until CNN cut out, he was just rambling and just, in a fact-free way about all sorts of things under the sun. And it wasn't a press conference. It was just him in front of a podium saying the things we've heard him say a million times. It wasn't newsworthy, but it was treated as this, potentially news event. And I just really didn't understand it. I thought he once again succeeded in effectively playing the press, getting them to focus their cameras on him, and allowing him to be to have an audience where he could lie to them and get this really dishonest message across. I mean, even going as far as saying that not only did he think Kamala Harris is a radical left socialist or whatever, but he even said that that he doesn't think she loves the country and wants to destroy the country. And it's like, why are news organizations what's the news value in broadcasting that? I really have a trouble seeing it.
And what's the danger? It's not only that it doesn't have a news value, but isn't there an inherent danger in propagating these myths that are not based in fact at all?
There is. I mean, we know there is. And even if you watched that press conference and he lied 100 times and 95%, 99% of it, let's say you rejected. Your inherent filter said, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's not true, that's not true. But 1% of it goes through. He wins, right? That's a victory for him. And he's very, very effective at hammering home themes repeatedly, even if they're not true, until people just give up and effectively start accepting that. It seeps into the public discourse. And so by allowing him to have this medium in which he's allowed to talk unfiltered, and just, peddle a mountain of lies to an audience, I think that does have some danger to it. And, it's great to fact check it afterward, but those fact checks, I just don't think that necessarily can counter the volume of misinformation that he is actively spewing on the platform. And again, if there was news value to it, cover that. I think that's totally fair. And I think there are some cases with Trump. Maybe you could say that.
Well, you watched it. Was there any real news in that press?
No, there was no. And no one's talking about it today really in any real way. And I think by next week it'll be gone. It was empty calories. And I guess what's the purpose of feeding your audience that? And I also would point out, I think most people know there was little news, because it's not like outlets ran A1 stories, or digital stories at the top of their homepage about what he said, right? Like there wasn't any headline really from what he said. The news was that he's lying more, basically, and that he's unhinged. And we already know that, so it's not really breaking news either. So I don't really understand why you would play into that, why you would allow him the platform to abuse. But that continues to happen, and I just think it's unfortunate.
Yeah, there's a couple other things you point out in this newsletter that there's 3 bullet points, and I'm going to add a fourth. Charlie Kirk claimed Thursday that Kamala Harris, quote, wants to implement totalitarian communist price controls, which is just a blatant amount of bullshit. Meanwhile, Mark Levin smeared Tim Walz, repeatedly calling him a pervert and falsely accusing him of having given civil rights to pedophiles. These things, as you said, continue to seep in. And finally, Candace Owens and Andrew Tate pushed... This is... You wrote bizarre, and I can't think of a better word. The bizarre conspiracy. Donald Trump has made some kind of deal with the establishment, a.k.a. the deep state. Quote, I just feel like somewhere along the line, something has been agreed upon to prevent post-presidency or post-death for his empire and for his children. See, these are the things that bother the living shit out of me. And I don't understand, well, I do understand, it is about the clickbait and money, but how do you think we got to the point where that takes place? What have we done wrong?
I think a couple of things. Actually more than a couple of things. There's a long list of things that have created a media environment where those sorts of that kind of extremist rhetoric is allowed to proliferate. I think, for one, the first thing I'd say too is just that, like, I don't think that the traditional Washington D.C. Minded press corps understands the extremism that is coursing through a lot of the media that is that Republicans are getting their information from. And so this is not about, like, I like tax cuts, I don't think tax cuts are the right way to go for the economy. This is about, like, very dark accusations, that the vice presidential nominee is a pervert, right? That Kamala Harris doesn't love her country and is a totalitarian. Like, these are very weighty things that are just being casually thrown around on a daily basis in right-wing media. And I just don't think if you were to watch the evening news, you would understand that these forces are at work deceiving a lot of the country and really poisoning the public discourse. So that's number one. And number two, I'd say, how is this allowed to happen? I think one of the reasons it's allowed to happen is there hasn't been a lot of strong media reporting, and that's one of the things I'm trying to change, actually, by starting status.news, is that you need the antibodies in the system to reject these sorts of things, to counter them, to combat them. And when you don't have antibodies, these forces are allowed to slowly seize power. And you're seeing that, I think, in right-wing media, you see it elsewhere, and that's dangerous. And so I think good media reporting is really, really crucial. And unfortunately, you don't see legacy news organizations as much investing in it. There's a lot of investment in a lot of different areas, but you don't see robust investment in media reporting anymore. And I think that's really unfortunate and part of the problem here.
So how can you be effective as an independent?
Well, I think one of the ways is by just holding people's feet to the fire and being plain spoken about what's happening. I think that on the right at this point in time, if you were to cover them, I'm not. It's very tricky, I'd say. But like in the press, a good accountability journalism can actually result in some positive movement. And so by just covering how the press is covering other things, you can be impactful there. And so that's number one. I think that the audiences really enjoy or resonate with the candid nature in which independent journalists are given the freedom to write about these topics. So when I write about something, it's not massaged in weird ways where you don't have the same message. It's very clear and candid and blunt.
Well, that's not what we get today from corporate media very often. It's couched. It's
It's watered down a lot of times.
Yeah, and watered down. And so, what do you recommend to to viewers and readers of news? How should they amend what they do today? There are plenty of people that are pissed off with today's news, and people on the right and the left, they know something's wrong. I mean, you hear the same criticism from the right or the left, but they don't quite know what it is that's wrong. So what do you recommend to viewers and readers? How should they change their news habits?
Well, I mean, it's very important to rely on fact-based news organizations that are committed to the truth. So I think you start there. Are they committed to telling me what is actually happening? And so you've seen organizations, for instance, Fox News, in the Dominion case, behind the scenes, they knew things were not true, and they were still allowing those things to be advanced to viewers. So I would make sure I stay away from those organizations and those figures, and support good journalism. Whether it's the Journal or the Times, people who are committed to actually advancing the truth. But I also think and this is, I have self-interest in this now, but supporting independent journalism as well is also very important, because if something's not being done,
I like that idea.
Well, yeah, if there's not something that's being done by the legacy press, there's often a solution to it found in the independent press. And so by finding people who are actually committed to something, to a mission statement of telling the truth, of holding power accountable, and supporting them, I mean, that's very crucial, because unlike a cable channel, for instance, my thing is backed by viewers or by readers, and so if they're not supporting us, then this doesn't exist, right? And so by showing support in that way, just by reading, just by sharing, and if you can, by buying a paid subscription, that goes so much further, I think, than people might realize.
What do you think is the future of journalism?
Well, definitely, it's going to become a lot more direct to consumer. I think that's unquestionable, right? So you're going to see a lot of journalists, especially as these legacy news organizations struggle economically to find their footing. You're going to see a lot of journalists strike out on their own and just go straight to subscribers, and that's what I've decided to do. And I think you're going to see this pattern continue and really accelerate in the years to come. I think for the big news organizations, they're still going to be around for sure, but you're going to see them evolve in different ways, because the way of doing things in the past, that economic model is rapidly coming to an end. And so if they don't evolve, they're going to go away, and they're going to figure out a way to evolve. You're going to see, I think, a lot of budgets cut. You're going to see them shrink a little bit, and you're going to see them do things differently in the past. Maybe, you can't have a standing army of people around the world, or you're going to have to pay anchors less money, so in television news especially, that's going to be disrupted. But also you've seen the Washington Post and
anchors less money, there you go.
You've seen it at the Washington Post and at the Journal. They're trying to figure out this tricky news environment and get it right, and so these organizations are going to have to adapt to the new economic realities. And so I think in 5 to 10 years, really the news environment is going to look dramatically different than it does right now.
What do you what would your hope be?
My hope would be one that we figure this out, because it's so important. I mean, there has to be a strong press corps. So I want everyone to figure it out, and I think once someone figures that out, they could let everyone else know the secret. That would be great. But the other thing too, I'd say, is that it's so important for people to understand that news is expensive, that it's not something that's able to be created cheap, on the cheap. Like, you have to support the outlets that are doing the good work. And a lot of times I hear from readers, or when I was at CNN even, saying, "Why do you link to this outlet? I can't read it. I have to pay." And it's like, well, because they invested in that journalism, and so it's not free. You do have to pay for this sort of thing. And if you're going to pay for a Netflix account or a Starbucks coffee, which is $7 basically, pay for a subscription to a news organization that you think is committed to the truth.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear you say it. Because people will drop You'll go out to dinner and drop $150. You'll go to a movie. You'll go to a ball game. And yet you bitch about the news and you wonder why you don't have decent news, and it's because you won't support decent news.
A cocktail or a beer,
pay for.
Brian, a beer in Manhattan is basically $10. And people drop that very casually. And I'm not saying that it's not a lot of money. I mean, that's actually a ridiculous amount of money for a beer. And I wish New York, there's a little cheaper for having a beer.
That's New York, L.A., D.C., Chicago.
Sure. You gotta support. You gotta actually put your money behind organizations that are doing good work. And I think that is something that people are not used to, because the internet made it for a while where you could get high quality information for cheap. But as the legacy economic model dies, and news organizations they have no choice but to switch to a subscription model. And so they're counting on the public saying, we want good news and we are going to support you, and we're going to put our money, our wallet in on it. And it's kind of interesting, because that used to be a thing, right? People used to pay for the paper.
Yeah, you pay.
It just has to become a thing again.
Yeah, you pay, you get it. And there's other ways to do it online. For example, you can have a paywall for some of your premium stuff, and then
sure.
The stuff that everybody has, you put up for free, or maybe you get one or two free, in-depth pieces a month. But investigative reporting, which is the soul of all reporting, is that does cost money. But to your point, it is expensive, but it's not as expensive as a Hollywood movie. Or going to a ball game, and you'll
go into a ball game for $15-$20. That's a deal, right? And that's
for parking.
That's cheap entertainment, right?
That's cheap parking at a ball game.
There you go.
So it is expensive, but not on a scale as expensive as the entertainment. And I think we do poorly in letting people know that, look, it's still cheaper than what you're paying for your entertainment. But investigative reporting takes time. It takes knowledgeable people. It takes experienced and educated people. You can't go out and investigate a politician by kissing their ass. And a lot of what you see in reporting today is maybe it's not kiss ass reporting, but what it is PR reporting. It's just what's on the press release. We report it. This is what they said. Well, yeah, they said the moon was crashing to the earth tonight at midnight. Did anybody check that fact? I mean,
we haven't even, by the way, Brian, got into the fact that if people don't support the humans making the news, there's going to be soon robots making it for them. And I don't think they're going to enjoy that very much. So if you want human curated, news by experienced individuals who are invested in reporting, you've got to financially support them, because they need to make a living, and at the end of the day, that these companies need to make money to survive.
Yeah, and I've seen, I don't want AI doing my reporting. I've seen that movie, and at the end, Arnold Schwarzenegger burns in a fire. I don't want that.
Right.
Skynet is real. Oh, run! So that's the other thing that I find amusing. Well, is how we get blamed on. All right, so we get blamed if we cover Trump. We get blamed if we don't cover Trump. Mm-hmm. But there's a happy medium. And I don't think we've reached that, have we?
I just think you have to cover Trump right. I think there's a huge I think you need to cover Trump. Obviously, he's a very powerful person who is doing a lot of damage to the public discourse, among other things. And so you need to cover him, but you don't need to give him a free microphone for half an hour to say whatever he wants under the sun. There's a difference between covering him correctly and just giving him your platform, or allowing him to, taking him at his word earnestly when we know by now that you should not. And so I guess I think it's important to cover him, but in context, that's key. And by letting people know what is real and what is not, and also stop. I think the press corps often too much focuses on process. This is what his campaign advisors are saying. He's going to be campaigning here because politically he thinks that he can win this state, et cetera, and more on the substance. Like, what is he specifically saying? What is he going to do if he's in office? Who is he going to hire? What kind of damage is just his words having on institutions? There's a lot of different ways you can cover Trump, but the giving him a microphone and letting him rant and then just talking about like his political strategy, I just think that's the wrong way to cover someone, especially 8 years in.
Are we capable of covering it the way you'd like to see it? Do you think we're capable of that?
I mean, I think you're certainly capable. It's just a matter of I think leadership. I think a lot of news organizations and having the thick skin to do it, and having the backbone to do it. And it's easier to do the more nonpartisan, if you will, or not. It's not even nonpartisan. It's just like the more inoffensive. This is his campaign strategy. This is what advisors are saying he's going to do to try to beat Harris. It's tougher and it takes a little bit more spine to be, doing this is what he said and this is why it's incorrect and this is why it's violating norms and this is the damage it's causing and that kind of hard-hitting coverage. And so you got to have a stomach for it. And
how
and that
hard
comes
is it
down
to call him a convicted? I mean, these are facts. He's a convicted felon. He's running for president. Yeah. He threatens people often. He makes fun of people all the time. I don't know anything that isn't divisive about the man, and yet we cover him like he's my Uncle Bob coming to my neighborhood picnic. And I don't know that at this point. I don't know what the reason is behind it. Yeah. I know it's wrong. I often say that money is behind most of what we do in the press.
And I will say, Brian, I think it's important to say actually that there has been a lot of good reporting on this, right?
Yes, yes.
I think
I don't want to
the
short.
New York Times, for instance, they get a lot of criticism, but they ran a very good series. And they've been doing a lot of good work showing what he's going to do if he comes back in office. And they've been actually conveying this, I think, in really interesting ways. They've been being innovative and trying to find ways where they can convey this in short, like digestible bites for the public that might not read a 3,000-word story, but they'll scroll through something quickly. So I think there is a lot of good work in this realm, but often, but also there's some work to be done as well. But from
I think they've also had some missteps. I think the Times has had a few missteps as well.
Yeah, it's not to say that they've got it. I mean, but I think it's important to recognize when there is a good thing that's been done, right? And I don't want to be sitting here on saying everything's wrong because that's definitely not the case. But there is room for improvement as we've been discussing.
Yeah, as we conclude this, I guess I'll leave with this last question for you. Where do you think, or who do you think does the best job of covering politics today? If you had to, is there anyone that you would recommend besides Status? For those of you who don't know, you want to subscribe to Status. But but we're covering politics. Who's your go-to?
That actually depends. I would say it depends because it depends what you're looking for. But I think actually what I would say is some of the people who have been the best at covering Donald Trump have actually been the former Republicans. And I would say like the Bulwark, for instance, has done a very good job. People like Tim Miller, Sarah Longwell, they've done a very good job being hard-hitting in their analysis and being spot on a lot of times. Charlie Sykes. These are people who used to be in the conservative media. They're not these woke figures, but I think actually having worked in that wing of the media, the conservative wing, and coming out of it, I think they have a lot more contacts and understanding of who the players are and how dangerous they are. And they've been very no holds barred. So I would give them a lot of credit. But also, again, that they're not doing a lot of the reporting. And so, there is a lot of good reporting that's coming from people like Jonathan Swan or Maggie Haberman at the Times, or the Washington Post has done a lot of good reporting. It's a mixed bag. And so, it depends what you're looking for. But on analysis, I often think that the folks at the Bulwark do a very good job.
There you go. Well, with that said, look, I really appreciate you being here, Oliver. You got to come back. We talk about the media often on this show, and it's always a joy to talk to someone who's actually doing the same type of work, trying to hold the media accountable. And I really do appreciate it. And anything you need, I'm there for you, brother. So plug what you want.
Well, I would just say if anyone's listening and they're interested in the media topics and how it's all connected, I would urge them to go to status.news. That's my new publication. There's a free component if you can't afford to pay. I do understand. I would urge you to if you can. But status.news, type in your email. There is a free component to that. You can get it in your inbox. I'm running it 5 nights a week. And your subscription just really, it means more than I can say, especially at this early stage. I just launched last week. And so any help that your audience can provide in that regard means the world to me.
There you go. And the name of this show is Reverse Shot. We're here every Saturday at 2 a.m. 2 p.m. You can come at 2 a.m. I'm not going to be here. Every Saturday at 2 p.m. the show drops. I want to thank you for joining us, and we will catch you next time. And that's it for Reverse Shot. I want to thank you once again. My name is Brian Karam. Subscribe to the Mary Trump Media Network. Hit that subscribe button. Join us every week as we take a look at the problems of the press by turning around and getting a reverse shot. Thank you very much.